We love kind of decorating our homes as a thing because it is like this, it's like our sanctuary. And I was just with my mother last weekend, and we were out shopping. I was kind of helping her change out a few things in the house, and she said she needed some decorative pillows. And I found a closet. It was like a home goods in there. It was like all of these pillows, like every color. And I'm like, you don't need any more pillows. No more pillows, no more linens. And I find myself, I'm the same way. I didn't really realize that. But when people come over, they're like, why do you have so many pillows on your bed? But it is like we love kind of building a nest, a piece here. So it's like giving and giving, but also making sure that we are charged up and keeping ourselves sustained.
Welcome to the PM Podcast, brought to you by Evertrue Studios, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and changemakers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. My guest today is Edgar Villanueva, award-winning author, speaker, strategist, and founder and CEO of the Decolonizing Wealth Project and Liberated Capital. An enrolled member of the Lumbee Tribe, Edgar has become one of the leading voices challenging philanthropy to rethink its relationship with wealth, power, healing, and reparative action. His best-selling book, Decolonizing Wealth, sparked conversations across the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors about generosity, justice, and what it means to repair harm through the movement of money. Today, through the Decolonizing Wealth Project, Edgar is leading Moonshot, an ambitious 10-year effort to catalyze $1 trillion in reparative giving grounded in dignity, reciprocity, and healing. In this episode, we talk about Edgar's journey from home to national leadership, the spiritual dimensions of money and philanthropy, the resistance in response to his work, what reparative philanthropy actually means in practice, and why he believes healing must sit at the center of the conversation about wealth. Thank you for taking time to talk about something which you've talked about before, and that's this unique personal journey that you have, and how it intersects with your work in philanthropy, but also what you're trying to bring to philanthropy. You, in the beginning of your book, you talk just in the very, very beginning about family members, but I don't know where they really play in your life, and I'd love to know more about your family if you're willing to share that.
Sure, absolutely. So I do talk about my mother in the book and probably mention her on a stage once a week. I carry her with me. And so growing up, it was just my mom and me, so a really small family. I do have some siblings that I didn't grow up with, but so my mom is really was the center of my life as a kid. Her role modeling and teachings and way of being. I literally am becoming my mother more and more every single day, which I actually love. I'm a proud mama's boy. So yeah, my mom is just a really inspirational person. She had me when she was 15 years old.
Oh my!
And overcame all types of things, and poverty, and just and all the things that can come with extreme poverty, and really found a way to push through that and to get some education for herself. She was hardworking, 3 jobs, and just a super caring person. And so the way that she moved through community and loved others and took care of folks, I often say I didn't really understand how poor we were, because it was we were always helping people who were worse off, and that sense of an obligation of taking care of our neighbors was just something that I saw her do, and something that she made me do as a kid. It wasn't like we spent the weekend every Saturday in the neighborhood visiting people and giving kids candy and hugging them and just kind of checking on folks. And a lot of that was also attached to our church. My mom converted to being a born again Christian, and was really involved in a lot of different ministries and outreach to the church, connected to the church. But that was where I learned a lot about service, and And so, yeah, she is still is the biggest influence on my life.
You said you become more and more like her every day. In what way?
One in appearance. I look a lot like my mother, and I just definitely see that in the mirror as I am approaching a big birthday. I'm like, I'm literally becoming physically this person, it looks like. But I think, my mother is a person who is just really, she has a lot of discernment about people that she's around and how she spends her energy. And she's a big protector of her peace. And, when you come out of situations, as a child where there's a lot of drama, trauma, and things going on, and she's found a way to really connect to her inner peace and to maintain a peaceful household. And while there may be all kinds of things going on in the family and whatnot, there's always been sort of a wall around our home as a place of peace and not allowing people to bring all of that stress, here. And so I find that I'm very similar. I peace is the most important thing in my life and protecting that peace and my energy and having that balance of giving, 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 and wanting to help as many people as we can, but also finding a time to come back and retreat and to a peaceful home. So we love kind of decorating our homes as a thing because it is like this. It's like our sanctuary. And I was just with my mother last weekend, and we were out shopping. I was kind of helping her, you know, um, change out a few things in the house, and she said she needed some decorative pillows. And I found a closet that had it was like a home goods in there. It was like all of these pillows, like every color. And I'm like, you don't need any more pillows. No more pillows, no more linens. And I find myself, I'm the same way. I didn't really realize that, but when people come over, they're like, "Why do you have so many pillows on your bed?" Like literally, they're like 8 pillows. But it is like we love kind of building a nest of peace here. So it's like giving and giving, but also making sure that we are charged up and keeping ourselves sustained.
Yeah, which is not easy to do if you're giving all the time. But if you're giving from a place of love and comfort, I guess it makes it a little easier. So
Right.
I'm going to have the image of pillows in my mind now all day.
Right.
Uh, well, now you said she was a born again Christian and we become born again Christians, I guess is the right way to think about that. So she became a born again Christian. Was that also part of your journey? Because I know later, of course, you went into the seminary, and so how did that inform your own thoughts about where spirituality and specifically Christianity flow into your thinking?
Yeah, growing up, the church was the center of our lives. It was so yeah, my grandfather was the first to convert, and so and specifically to a Pentecostal church within Christianity. And for folks who may not know, Pentecostal is very lively church, like very like I love. So I was very involved in music growing up. I still, although I don't attend church regularly anywhere. I still am fond of gospel music and it lifts me up to kind of, turn on some music here and there. But yeah, it was a place where, as a young person, I think there was a lot of discipline. There was a lot of, opportunities to be involved in all kinds of things. I learned American Sign Language in the church and later worked as an interpreter when I was in college. We had all these ministries, I was in the drama ministry, I was singing, I was sort of on the stage doing something all the time and at the church every night of the week for something. And it was, yeah, so it was really, it was, it helped me build skills. It was a community and instilled in me this sense of, responsibility. Now, the Pentecostal church is really about evangelism and, saving souls and taking the gospel into to all of the world. So, that there was a lot of training around that, and maybe I've found some of that useful in terms of trying to spread this gospel of decolonizing wealth everywhere. But I had a really positive experience with church, although there are things that I have had to unlearn and detach from and don't really stand by. But in general, it was a really positive force in our lives. And even around money, I learned a lot about money in church. A lot of folks don't know this, but the Bible talks about money more than any other subject, even more than like love and things like that. It's a really important subject, and we talked about it in church quite a bit. And of course, our church taught tithing. So when I first got a job when I was 14 or 15, I gave my 10%. And that's a practice that still influences me today to give a minimum 10% back of my income. And so, yeah, lots of things there. I will say too that, I did feel this calling to want to be, in community professionally. I didn't know about the nonprofit sector at all, when it was time to go to college. So the church was all I knew. That's where we had been recipients of generosity and where we had given. And so I did go to seminary because I felt like, oh, I want to do this full time. I want to help others. And when I got to seminary, I learned, at some point that, oh, this is not going to work out for me, given who I am. And I'm not, completely aligned with all the things they teach there, and, found my way to the nonprofit sector. But it was, I will say that what I did find in church, beyond sort of the skills and sort of, the opportunities to learn about a lot of these topics, I did discover spirit in church, and sort of learning to tap into that inner, voice, and that intuition that is inside of us, and very early on, and learned how to use that as sort of a guide in my life. And that's something that I felt like it actually guided me away from that church, and has guided me to where I am today. And I still really rely heavily on that. And I seek the wisdom of lots of elders and folks, but there's also a process and a way that I go about making sure I'm in tune with my own intuition and spirit, that I think is a really powerful tool that we all have to guide us through life.
There's a lot baked into what you just said, and one part of it, which we haven't talked about, but I know you've talked about in the book and in speeches, is being a part of the Lumbee Nation. I don't know if you use that phrase, the nation, but what you just described in terms of the church, it didn't have that reference at all. So, first of all, I should just ask you about your connection to the tribe, to that culture, to your understanding of it, when that came about, but also how that intersected, if at all, with this spiritual journey, especially the Christian one, which, again, you mentioned misalignment. We can get into that if you want, but how those two things intersected and then maybe drifted from one another.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, I am enrolled in the Lumbee Tribe. We won federal recognition last December after like 130 years of fighting for that. So it's something we're really proud. And I'm very, very involved, very connected. Although I didn't grow up in the tribal community, which is in Robeson County, North Carolina, grew up in, just about an hour and a half away. I spent a lot of summers and just, lots of family there. So a lot of time in the community. The tribe itself in our community is actually very Christian. And it's something that is surprising to folks. But being in the South, there's a history there around how a lot of this came to be. We indigenous religions, native religions were outlawed. We weren't allowed to practice those religions. And so with colonization and all those things being taken away, and Christianity was sort of forced upon folks. It was a part of their colonization process. It is something that is the pervasive faith of my community. And in Robeson County, there, I mean, there's a church on every corner. It's a very church-going population, very Christian. And one thing that actually surprised me, as someone who was really in the church at that time as well, when I went to do my paperwork to enroll in the tribe. So, there's a tribal enrollment process. You have to bring all these family records and all of that. As I was completing the application, one of the questions was, what church do I go to? And I thought that was really bizarre. I was like, really bizarre. And they wanted to know which church I went to in that county. And I said, well, I actually live in Raleigh, an hour or so away. So I go to a church over there. Is that okay? And they were like, well, when you come home, what church do you go to? And I was like, so I had to like remember sort of a family church where, there are like family reunions and when a lot of folks, when they pass away, that's where they're buried. So there is a deep attachment. We've previous chairmen of our tribe have read from the Bible, for Christmas and those kinds of things. So, that was a question I actually struggled with. And you know, as I was becoming an adult and just digging deeper and deeper to, learn about my history and ways of being. And I met with a woman and Donna Chavis from my tribe and kind of asked her these questions at one point. And like, how can we be like Native and Christian? Is that sort of, and, the wonderful thing about being Native is we can be all the things. We are very expansive. We are not binary. And we can, being a Christian doesn't make you any less Native than, not being a Christian. But I think that what you'll find in my community is that's sort of the widespread sort of faith tradition, but there's also a spiritual tradition there. And we do lots of cultural events. We have powwow. So I actually think there's a difference between religion and spirit. There is a difference. And religion is sort of, those are teachings and sort of like guidelines and sort of things to believe, where I think spirit is this interconnecting, invisible force around us that connects us to each other, to ourselves, to nature, that is like guiding us towards action. And in some places there might be a church, for example, where spirit is operating there. Spirit also operates in other places outside of those communities, in nature, a girl's trip, away, in ceremony. It's just really everywhere. So that's been one of my biggest learnings growing up in a church that was a spirit-filled church, so to speak, where I was kind of taught that that was the only place that spirit existed, and outside of that, it didn't. And that's part of my unlearning and decolonizing. It's like, no, there's some spirit there, but spirit is just everywhere. We can't put it in a box, and it's inside of us. It is a part of us. And I've learned really to experience spirit in myself, in nature, in the small things, and in a quiet moment at home, in meditation, however, folks may access that. And I think that's where, that's the thing that I'm really most interested in, because spirit exists outside of any teaching. And some of those teachings have been weaponized and are harmful. But spirit is not harmful. It's a part of our being and who we are. And only wants the best for us and to guide us toward goodness.
How difficult was it to break out of the set of rules? I mean, that were probably there present both in the religion, but they always exist for us in some form, no matter how loving our families may be, with our family, with our community, with the tribe. I mean, there's always a set of rules. Maybe it's written, maybe it's not, but you definitely went on your own journey, starting, I guess, with seminary, and then moving from that into this larger exploration of health. And then moving on from that definition, that box of what health is and how to explore it, to the new ones. How difficult was it to break through every single time? Or is that the right description?
I mean, that kind of feels right. Looking back, it feels right, but when you're in it, it's, I didn't know if I was breaking through or breaking down, there's some of this stuff, but, I think that what I'm learning about my journey is that there were many times where I felt like I didn't belong, and so in the Pentecostal church where I was in seminary, I'm gay, and I really had to hide that part of myself. I went to conversion therapy. I did all the things to try to pray the gay away. And a certain point in time where I'm like, it's not going away, then I knew that, I was not going to be able to be a part of that community anymore. And I was, I didn't belong. People were very loving. I didn't experience a lot of the painful things that a lot of, queer folks do in faith communities. So I'm thankful for that. But it was definitely, I knew that I had to take a different path. And so that it is sad. It is hard, to not feel accepted, in a community that, especially for me, that was like, like my whole world, as a child. And to go to church and be a part of a community that you're always going to feel like you're less than, or there's something wrong with you, or you have this sin in your life that you need to deal with. But from that sense of not belonging, it pushed me to create a place where I do belong. And I would say that's probably true for in work and working in philanthropy, and feeling a major sense of like being other in the sector, and not belonging, and something not quite fitting about the way that it was structured, and what I thought my job was to do. That I had the opportunity from that deep sense of not belonging to create. And I think that from those wounds and the sadness and of not fitting in, that can be channeled toward like, well, let's create a place that we do fit in that can also be a home for a lot of other people. And I didn't realize that until recently. I was thinking about the work we do at DWP and kind of what my journey has been. And I was like, it really is sort of this confluence of like we created a new way to do philanthropy that is so inclusive, and then also, in a sense, this is like a spiritual community and movement that we're a part of. So it's yeah. So I think that paying attention to when those shadows in our lives and those hard times, and like what is the opportunity, or what is spirit calling us to create out of that might be the place that we can belong and create a space for others to belong.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful ground from which to build the empathy that you're talking about now, but you've written about, and it's not always. I don't see it everywhere, whether across the political spectrum, the spiritual spectrum. Often there's a tendency, or at least I feel that there's often a tendency towards judgment rather than just letting people speak their minds. I don't know if you felt that, but you certainly seem to express that in your book, talking about how it's important to kind of make space, I guess, for people on their journey. Is that right?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. That we all really can learn to extend more grace to others. I think because of my journey of being in this sort of right-wing evangelical community growing up, and coming out of that, when I left the church, I left North Carolina, I moved to Seattle, and it could not have been a more different place, right? And I was working in a very progressive organization, and my politics, had changed. And in that work, I got to really build relationships and be close to a lot of the prolific movement builders in this country that I was supporting. And I just always sort of compared these two worlds, right? And so a lot of the folks that are organizing or trying to influence sort of the world that I came out of. And I just sort of noticed that sometimes there's sort of misconceptions, or ways that people think about the other, that I'm like, there's good people over there. They're well-meaning folks, and I do think there's a way that we could probably bring people to our way of thinking or to our side. But there's we have to have on-ramps for folks into this work, and so I think that in an age of cancel culture and just sort of the policing of purity testing and all of that, it's really created a lot of a sense of not belonging. And even among folks who are in the movement, I think that as progressives is a place where we really struggle, is to have unity and to be in solidarity with each other. It's a lot of infighting. And so yeah, I kind of hold those two realities a lot. And I've been a part of so many conversations about narrative change, and we just need to get the framing right. And I kind of bring my mother with me, and in my heart and into the room often. And I think about, would my mother understand what they were talking about? With my family and the church I came from, really, is this a way that they would come around to like support this issue? But yeah, there's a lot of us versus them. And, I think that in order to win, we've just got to build our tent. And I'm not saying that we, let everyone into our tent. We don't want to welcome folks who are actively trying to harm us. But I do believe, I am a testimony of someone who changed, who came around. And that is because I had a lot of teachers and people who had grace and taught me and didn't kick me out the first time I made a mistake and or used, the wrong terminology. And because of that, I was able to grow and learn. And it's funny because a lot of folks have no idea that I actually came from that world. It's just they just know progressive Edgar. And no, I when I first registered to vote, I was registered as a Republican because that was just the way it was when you were in the church back then. It was an automatic thing, and I, was not, politicized at the time, and it took it took loving people in places where I began to see and understand inequality. And even though I was living in poverty and a person who was harmed by these systems, I didn't quite understand and needed to be taught and shown and then and also given the space to mess up. And so I really long for opportunities to bring folks in and having accessible language and ways and love is the way that we bring folks and grace. And also I long for more of that among us who are so-called progressive, that we can really just hold the complexities of all of our identities and be supportive. And I've been called out here and there, for not paying enough attention to this community or that community, and in the work. And we're all doing the best that we can with what we got. And I do feel like the tide is turning. I think the last election has really taught us that in the ways that folks may have left the Democratic Party, that maybe something's missing. I think that we could work on a sense of belonging and inclusion. And I feel like a lot of the things that are important, like faith, spirituality, belonging, that those things are being co-opted and used as political organizing tools by the right. And it's one reason I think they're winning, and we're seeing a lot of growth there. And that makes me really sad because these are really amazing tools that are also accessible to us, and we have used them in the past. But I think for some reason we've gone to a place to be, so elite and so heady, and in our work that we're missing the spirit and heart. We can beef that up in our approach, and that would help us to do this work a lot more effectively, and I think make this work a lot more joyful for us as well.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking about that narrative framing and kind of the policing of language, all these things, and you do reference those in the book too, both on the philanthropy side, the way people would kind of help you to retailer your language in the Reynolds environment versus maybe what people wanted to hear in Seattle. I'm sure you've encountered that in both those environments. For those who are just listening and not seeing, you're wearing the Decolonizer shirt right there.
Yeah.
And it is trademarked too, which makes sense. That phrase and other ones that you have not just used, but you've defined, which is so helpful to a conversation to define terms. Do you get pushback on that now? I mean, across the spectrum, because I'm sure that it raises lots of feelings. All the ones you talk about towards the end of the book, almost the 7 stages of grief or whatever, because when people encounter that concept that they live with maybe a colonized mindset, that can be very uncomfortable, especially if they feel like someone has told them that rather than they have discovered it for themselves. Where do you find that the language you're using today is helping everybody to get to this place where we can have a natural conversation without beating each other over the head with I'm right and you're wrong?
Yeah, I love that question. It's not officially trademark. It's kind of just like almost like a joke, like pop art. But but that has been confusing for a lot of folks. But yeah, I language really matters, and I have been doing this work now for 8 years. I my language has evolved, with the times, and we've done research to all types of research around things that we focus on at DWP and language, including reparations. We work on some heavy issues that it can be really triggering for a lot of folks, and I'm always thinking about language and how we can create an interest and an understanding and an appetite for folks who want to learn more and be a part of this. So, I don't shy away from talking about colonization, but it's in the context of really teaching history. And I am an advocate for repair, truth, and healing for all of us. And I think the big thing that we always remember in our work is when we're talking about history, when we're talking about what's wrong and what's broken, we don't demonize people in that. We are really bringing history forward as a way to understand how we got here and what's broken. And we can't repair our economy or repair the things that we care about if we don't understand how we really got here. And so colonization is a significant, really significant historical thing that happened on this land that has contributed and still contributes to a lot of the problems that we care about. And it is an active force that is at play in our systems and in philanthropy, that I talked about. So I don't shy away from that word. I think that, day number 1 that I'm walking into a place to maybe teach a workshop, I may not lead with that. Right. It's not necessarily what we put on the flyer to get folks to come in, because it is a word that requires some unpacking. We evolved our language over the past 3 years. We did a new strategic plan, rebranding, and all of that. And our mission statement sort of used to be that we were healing the ills of colonization, across the globe. And that, when you have a mission statement that requires explaining or double clicking on things, is probably not the best. And our new mission statement that came out from that work is transforming wealth into collective well-being. So it's just very clear. We're about wealth, and we're transforming that wealth, to work for all of us so that we can all thrive. And so that all my relations piece, that indigenous worldview, that we're all related, we're all in this thing together. We're not here to blame, point fingers. We just want to speak the truth about what's broken, how we got here, and then all work together because we are interconnected. Our thriving is mutual. Our suffering is mutual. That thread has always been there. And so we wanted that to be reflected in our mission statement. Because we are about, healing. Colonization is a really, daunting mission, and that is what we're going about doing. But we're really healing people, and the effects that colonization has had on their lives and their mindsets, particularly around money for foundations and donors and folks with wealth that we work with. And then the deployment of those resources are all going towards, healing work, returning of land, economic solidarity, supporting mental health, that type of thing. So, yeah, it's really interesting. There was a moment where, I had a little bit of fear, with sort of, politically things that were happening, and, the attacks on DEI and the attacks on, funders who were, prioritizing, race in their work, and our racial justice. And, everybody, I think, for a moment was like, what's going on? What's happening? There was a day that Elon Musk tweeted, if you say the word decolonization, you're a terrorist. And I kind of was like, oh my God, literally it was like in my name of my organization, what's going to happen here? And, we just, I paused, felt scared, and then we just kept right on moving because our work has been so rooted and grounded in love. It's never been about tearing down anyone. It's never been about, uh, privileging, uh, anyone. It's in resourcing, yes, because of trying to achieve some level of equity there, but it is really about all of us needing healing because colonization has impacted everyone, including white folks, and it is a history that is the dynamics of it is still pervasive and in all of our systems, and we see it so clearly now with everything that's happening. We are, excuse me, are experiencing a rollback of all these things and kind of going back to systems that are again separating us, dividing us, pitting us against each other, hoarding resources. We're seeing that as like live action here in the States, and so. Yeah, so language matters, and it is also something we don't shy away from. It's really about the intention and the feeling that people have when they experience the work and they hear us speak. And I spent a lot of time in conservative organizations and banks and places doing this work. That happens to be where a lot of wealth is, so I have to go to those places. And our name has never been an issue with folks because it's about what they know what we're there to do and what we're bringing and what they feel when they're in the programs.
Yeah, I can imagine that maybe there would be more curiosity than condemnation for most people, most curious people.
Absolutely.
But when you get a remark like that from somebody with a big following like Elon Musk, what kind of impact did that have on you and the organization? Have you been under threat at all? Or I know you weathered it because of what you said. You come from a place of love, but you still had to experience it, go back to your pillows and whatever else you had in your nest to recover every day. But has there been any immediate threat to you? And then taking that forward, we're having a conversation right after the Supreme Court just made a decision that kicked the legs out from under the Voting Rights Act, for example. And where there are discussions in Britain about Palestine action. I mean, we can do this all around the world. It's not specifically just the U.S. and Britain here. But this environment is very charged right now. So how are you contending with maybe the rise in threats as you go about this work?
Yeah, it's real. Being, the CEO of an organization that employs people, there are times when things were really hot and heavy, with philanthropy being targeted, and our work being, I'm like, oh, wow, like we are, probably considered to be quite radical over here. I was scared that something could happen if we were to be, I don't want to go to court and go through all of that. And in the way that others have had to do. And, now the people that work here, like, what if we had to close down, and the funding and people we support. But the fear was really short-lived. I feel, I definitely have even spoken out about sort of how philanthropy as a sector so willfully sort of complied and obeyed before there were even, mandates in place to do anything. And so, fortunately, I've seen a lot of folks stand up and not back down or not change and kind of be like committed to the mission. And so, I'm one that is in that camp. I think that it's there have been no direct attacks. At least twice, I know that my name has shown up in articles like in right-wing media. I received phone calls from folks like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, yeah, what's going on?" And they're, being where I was called, a threat to democracy, all kinds of things. But I just kept doing the work. Part of me feels like, oh, I must be doing something right if I'm being called out that way, right? My book hasn't been banned. I'm kind of like, hey, what's going on? Why isn't my book being banned?
Yeah.
So that's it is there's so many folks who are probably at more risk than I am. I am while taking steps to be cautious, and deciding when to say what, and and just having some strategy behind some things, because we don't want to invite unwanted attention necessarily, but there's so many folks who are doing work on the front lines that are walking very bravely. And so I'm watching those folks. I'm being inspired um, by those leaders, and I'm like, hey, if they're not afraid, why should I be afraid? And Also, I just know that this work is really not about me and DWP even. Like, this is a movement and work that has been happening, that is just, it's a movement. And even if DWP were to close down, this work would continue in some way. So I don't put a lot of time or energy into like worrying about things. And I also think that the things maybe have lightened up a little bit in terms of the focus on targeting of philanthropy. I haven't heard a lot lately. I think they have so many things going on and they're targeting so many things. I mean, this war and everything else, that maybe they have kind of moved on. We'll see. But I do feel like for a moment in the philanthropic sector, there feels like folks are kind of breathing like, "Ah, okay, maybe we're like okay to just kind of keep doing our work every year." But never a dull moment, and I never imagined in a million years that, philanthropy would be under attack by the government.
Yeah, it is. It is a pretty curious time, and as you say, it hasn't stalled anything you're doing. And I know you've got. Is it a $1 trillion moonshot? Explain what this is.
Yeah. So at about year 5, we did an evaluation of our work at Decolonizing Wealth Project. We do grant making in community, we do storytelling work, and we do a lot of work to support donors, foundations, corporations, and thinking about reimagining giving from a place of repair through our reparative philanthropy framework. And I know that we have had impact. We're giving away a lot of money. I had lots of anecdotal, stories and donors and foundations that I work with directly. But I really wanted to understand our impact. So we hired an evaluator and did a 5-year report. And I was really like, wow, like, okay, so that's really good information. And so building from there, we then asked the question, what is our superpower? What should we be doing next? What do we bring forward into the next few years? Because I never had a strategic plan. I say spirit was my strategic plan. I just sort of trusted intuition, but at this point, it's like, okay, we have some strengths here that we should really be leveraging and bringing some focus to the work. With that plan, I wanted to announce a bold sort of North Star, a moonshot. And we have unlocked $1 billion, in reparative capital in a short amount of time as an organization. So I was like, a trillion is possible. A trillion is possible. And so when we announced that, some folks were like, wow. But it really is a drop in the bucket compared to like what's really needed to repair. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what folks are giving and investing to dismantle our democracy. In the last election, a handful of donors gave $1 billion to keep people from not voting. And so I wanted the Moonshot to feel, really ambitious because we need to shift our mindset around these small little dollars we're giving, thinking that we're going to see big change. We've got to give more money. We've got to unlock more money, and we've got to give differently. And so I'm putting that Moonshot out. The timing was really, fortunate. I think when we announced it, is sort of when a lot of the things began happening in philanthropy and some of the attacks, and people were getting quiet and sort of like not sure what to do. And by putting out sort of this signal, like $1 trillion, this campaign, we found that a lot of folks, it brought sort of something inspirational. For folks to get behind and to be a part of this in a time where philanthropy was sort of waffling. So that's what it's about. It's really bringing our skills, our superpower, our focus to unlocking resources to repair. And we know that thinking about historically what needs to be repaired and currently what needs to be repaired that's being broken is just significant. And so that's our charge for the next 10 years.
And when you do an analysis like that, and then you think about what's the plan for the future, and you compare it to the expenses that are being outlaid for competitive ideas, let's put it that way, all the ways to restrict people's ability to vote and other things. That's one way to think about what the cost might be. But as $1 trillion, as enormous as that sounds, is that enough? If you were going to repair what needs to be repaired, what would that cost, not just in terms of dollars, but what is the real cost of trying to repair all of us?
Oh my gosh. It's there's probably not even a number that is adequate. I think that there is no number, and not just the financial resources that are needed, but the spiritual and emotional and mental repair, the cultural repair that's needed. So this is the work of our lifetime and for generations to come. And so hopefully the Moonshot is just helping folks understand how much it's going to take and be willing to do more. So 5% giving from foundations is not going to cut it. We know that progressive donors tend to give less than conservative donors. So, a lot of the work that I'm doing and preaching around what we need to change, I'm talking to progressive donors. We can learn a lot from how money moves on the right. And then, we've got to organize and really advocate, as a lot of our partners are doing in the reparations movement and the land back movement and truth and reconciliation movement, to actually pressure governments to do repair work and to pay up to support repair in communities. And so, we've invested $12 million in the reparations movement in the last couple of years. We see commissions in like 20 to 30 cities across the country, in spite of, nationally, things being politically difficult. Locally, a lot of things have moved. The task force in California last year got $10 million in an allocation toward reparative work that that task force asked for. So it is money in philanthropy, but it's also, liable institutions like state, local, national governments that also need to be a part of repair and paying for to right the wrongs and to return land for things that they've been a part of as well. So $1 trillion is not enough, and I feel like we're going to get to $1 trillion in like the next year. Probably we should have maybe aimed even higher.
You've talked about being a healer. That's, I guess, the calling. that you found, and that dollars, instead of being, the root of all evil. And I love the way you help people to revisit that scripture in the book. It's not the root of all evil. It is, again, what
Love. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the love of money, right? That's the root of all evil. So by thinking about using capital to repair, to heal, I'm wondering where you imagine that taking you personally. Has it satisfied that need to find repair in your community, in your family, in yourself? Because ultimately the journey we take takes a lot out of us. So where are you as a healer today?
I'm healing, and I'm so grateful for this journey that Decolonizing Wealth Project has afforded me to be a part of unlocking money, because I do believe money can be medicine. And I've seen what it's done in community when we've unlocked these resources, but I've also seen what it's done in institutions and in the lives of donors and families that I've worked with. Philanthropy is very spiritual if we move beyond the transactional of me giving here. But if there is a truth and repair lens brought to that, when a family that may be burdened by a history around how wealth was accumulated there's some freedom that comes with returning that wealth, right, and naming that truth. And man, those are some of the happiest people I know who have done that work. And it is hard work. It is to sit in the grief of some of that. But on the other side, it is really, really beautiful. So being a part of facilitating that, and seeing, land return to tribes. Last year, we facilitated 17,000 acres in California. That is personally just, very healing for me. So I feel inspired every single day by the people who step up to do this work, both in philanthropy and donors who don't have to. Sometimes, I do this money stories conversations with wealthy folks, and I'm always like, why? If it were me, I might just be at the beach chilling, but you are doing this work. You want to do this hard work, and of confronting your family and having these hard conversations, and working to repair. But it's because we all know and feel the brokenness, and people want that to be we want to be better. And so that's why I think of myself as a healer, and I invite everyone to take on that identity, to do your own work of healing, and around money, but also just more broadly. We all need to be doubling down on the self-care and just protecting our minds and spirits in this time, and also just be a part of helping others heal. And one way to do that is by giving. There's a lot of ways. We have a community called Liberated Capital that anyone's welcome to join. As a community of 700 folks who give whatever they can collectively, and we've moved $30 million through that fund. So it feels really good to be a part of something that is, making a difference. So that's so healing is what I say.
Well, that's it for this episode of the PM Podcast. You can learn more about Edgar Villanueva, the Decolonizing Wealth Project, and Liberated Capital at decolonizingwealth.com. Our thanks to our sponsor, Evertrue, the global leader in donor engagement and fundraising intelligence, helping nonprofits find, engage, and inspire their supporters. Our producer is Jack Frost, and our theme music is Moving Out, Moving In by Jay Taylor, courtesy of Epidemic Sound. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe and check out our sister shows, Frontlines of Social Good and How to Raise, all part of the Philanthropy Mastermind series. Until next time, I'm Jay Frost. Thanks for joining me.